Welcome to Conversations with Aunt Elizabeth, the podcast inspired by my book, I'm a Registered Dietitian, Now What?, where I have the absolute joy to sit back, relax, and have a conversation about nutrition with a variety of people who share their personal story of passion and purpose, especially registered dietitians. I am celebrating National Egg Day and National Egg Week on the podcast today by having a conversation with Katie Smith. She is a registered dietitian and a farmer. We talk about her passions of both professions and what dietitians should know about agriculture. Please enjoy my conversation with Katie. Well, I'm excited to chat with you today. I know that we have crossed paths many different times, but nothing in the aspect of social media and that type of stuff, but we got to go to a conference together, which I'm so excited that we actually got to meet in person at one point. But we didn't have a lot of time to talk to each other. So I wanted to get to know you better and know more about your dietitian journey and talk a little bit about agriculture this week, since it's a very big week for National Egg Week. So maybe take me back to when you were a younger Katie. When did you kind of get interested in dietetics, nutrition, and all those kind of fun things?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first, just thank you for the invitation and for thinking of not only me as another dietitian, but just for me and the concept of agricultural as well. And, you know, it's kind of funny because when you think about the title now of dietitian and farmer, there are two titles that I never, ever imagined that I would carry in life. So I guess never say never, because we never know what new journeys lie ahead of us. And so when I was in school, I was studying athletic training and exercise science. And so I really always had my eye on something in healthcare. And I started that with a sports medicine journey. And then that transitioned as I was going through school. And I really discovered a passion for women's health and particularly obstetrics. And so as I started to work and do more internship opportunities and working outside of college, I started to recognize as I was teaching group exercise classes and doing personal training that I was getting asked so many questions about nutrition that I either A, didn't know the answer to, because in our undergraduate curriculum, we just had one general nutrition course, which is very typical of exercise science programs, or I wasn't qualified to legally be able to answer the question that I was being asked within my scope of practice. And so I decided, okay, I know I want to do graduate school anyway, because I'm interested in teaching in higher ed. And so why not look for a graduate program around nutrition? And so that is honestly kind of how I opened up my graduate search and decided I would go as far away from Iowa as I possibly could. Being born and raised in Northwest Iowa and then doing my undergraduate studies at Simpson College, I thought, you know what, I'm ready to branch out. I had just come back from an internship in Washington, D.C. for a summer, and I loved it. And I thought graduate school is a great time because you know you're only going to be gone for a year or two. So if you don't like wherever you go to, you can always come back. But I started to really focus my search around the academic program and particularly wanting to be able to work with pregnant women. And evidently, as it played out, the best program and the best research opportunity for me was 45 minutes closer to home at Iowa State instead of further away. So anyway, all things happen for a reason. But the reason that my path crossed into dietetics then was as a result of my graduate school mentor. So she was is still to this day, an exercise physiologist, but also a registered dietitian. And so my graduate program was Nutrition Science is the name of the program. And for someone who didn't study dietetics as an undergraduate, I just saw nutrition in the title and figured, great, this is what I'm looking for. And quickly in probably that first semester, maybe it was time that we were registering for classes in the second semester, and I was looking at another semester of a lot of biochemistry and a lot of science and not as many applied courses, so to speak. I asked my advisor, when do I get to take like nutrition assessment, or when do I get to learn to have conversations and make change with people? And she's like, well, all of those courses are in the dietetics program. And I said, oh, no. Dietetics, I don't want to work in a nursing home. I don't want to do meal planning at a school. That was way back before we had dietitian prevalence that we do right now. And so she's like, oh, honey, you have a lot to learn about dietetics. And so it opened up this whole new conversation around what is dietetics and what are the opportunities within dietetics. And that was really where I found, I can bridge my interest in health with food and nutrition. And so I really enjoyed the clinical aspect of studying nutrition and clinical dietetics. And so that's where a lot of the rest of my training was focused around, was kind of that medical nutrition therapy element of our dietetics training. And as far as the farming piece coming into it, that came when I got married. So I married into a farming family. I was not raised on a farm myself. I grew up in the same town of my spouse's family. And so it was a small rural community. I grew up next to a field. We were on the dead end road. So I always grew up next to a field, and, a lot of fields in the area in Northwest Iowa, but had no understanding at all of what it meant to be a farming family or to be part of a farming operation. So I have learned all of that in the last 10 years.
And that's how long you've been married. And that's how long you've been married?
Yeah. Yep. 10 years this summer. So
did you meet your husband then while you were in school or before you were in dietetics, or kind of where did that cross paths?
So we went to the same school growing up, never dated in school, but we're just a small community. And so we knew of each other and always tended to gravitate to be in the same areas, just with a large group of friends. When you're back home on Christmas break or winter break or whatever it might be, summer break, you tend to cross paths with similar people or at local softball games or baseball games. And so we had a friendship that, again, this was before we had texting and social media. And so we joke that actually that summer that I moved out to Washington, D.C., we emailed back and forth around how my summer was going out there with never any, thought of dating. It was just, that's how you kept in contact with your friends. Exactly. So, and then things transpired, later that year or so into something more. And here we are 10 years later.
Interesting. So I love that you kind of said, initially you were into exercise science. You had all these nutrition questions that people are asking you. And I think that's great that you found kind of your passion for dietetics and nutrition through people wanting to know more information from you. And so you sought that out. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of soul searching. And it's something that now as a professor at the college level, I always bring back to my students of, ask questions and, take the internship that you don't think you're going to like, because even an internship where you explore a career that you discover this is not for me, that's still a successful internship, and sometimes even more successful than, yep, I thought I wanted to do physical therapy and my internship confirmed that for me. It's good to be able to rule out early on sometimes what it is that you don't want to do as well.
That's so true. That's so true. And then I think that's a great segue into how did you, you did your master's and then you did your internship. So how did you determine that you wanted to go on and teach and be a professor?
I really enjoyed the college environment and the higher ed environment when I was in college myself. I didn't say this part of it, but I started as a double major in education and athletic training, thinking that I wanted to teach health classes at a high school and be their athletic trainer. So I always had an interest in education. Just took me a while to figure out at what level I wanted to teach. And so as I started to further explore graduate school, and being around the college setting. And then in graduate school, I had the opportunity to be able to co-teach the medical nutrition therapy course and then TA a couple of other courses. I realized this is really what I enjoy doing, because I wouldn't have an opportunity to teach health and nutrition that often in a K-12 setting. So I would have more of that opportunity to do that at the college level.
That's so well, and that's very true. And to kind of make that impact I feel like that's what you do with your students now. They're all navigating kind of the similar situation you were at that point in your life and in your undergraduate. So I feel like now you're at that crossroads exactly where with them when you were doing the same thing.
It is. And we're in such a unique time right now in dietetics in terms of shifting to the master's degree that I'm so excited to be at an institution that, it's unique for us to have a dietitian on staff when we don't have a dietetics program per se. I'm teaching in the health and exercise science program, but what that provides to an institution in terms of the mentoring of our students is phenomenal. I actually had 2 students doing advising yesterday in my office who's wanted to talk about becoming a dietitian. And there are a lot more options available for them now as we look at shifting the career towards a master's degree and being able to start their education and continue their education for undergraduate purposes at an institution like Simpson.
Yeah. And Simpson, maybe just explain Simpson College just a little bit for those who aren't familiar with the college.
Sure. Yeah. Simpson College is a private liberal arts institution that is just south of Des Moines, Iowa. And as I mentioned, we don't have an undergraduate dietetics program because the only current undergraduate program in the state of Iowa is at Iowa State University. And so typically your smaller institutions aren't going to offer a dietetics program because of how heavily we rely on the food science programs within the curriculum as well. And so it takes a lot of resources to be able to implement a dietetics program, a lot of people, and it's not something that you're typically going to find at a smaller school.
But and I think it's interesting though about how just you can still have lots of crossover with exercise science, and that you have students coming in discussing, the opportunity of being a dietitian with you as a resource that can kind of guide them of what they should be taking and what can kind of prepare them for that schooling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have a lot of conversations, even the students, of course, that are not wanting to go into nutrition around the role of nutrition. And at least 50, if not 60 to 70% of the students that I teach are pre-professional in some program. So PT or OT or PA, and helping them recognize the importance of nutrition, because without that, they're going to have a hard time meeting their goals of therapy with their patients as well. So you never know who the patient is going to click with. And so if everyone can have on their radar the importance of nutrition, it really is a team approach to get some of those patients to eat or drink.
Sure. Yeah. And also I think about just becoming, getting your PhD in nutrition. I feel like it's kind of scary. So, I mean, for those people that, master's always seems very approachable for most students because it's kind of like just a continuation of what they're currently doing, just a little bit more intensely. So maybe talk a little bit about that next level of getting your PhD and what that kind of looks like, and not to be scared of it and be kind of a pro PhD person for me.
Sure. So I was unique in my entire pathway, but I didn't actually finish a master's program. So once I identified that the program I was in and the research that I was doing was exactly what I wanted to continue to do, and that, yes, I wanted to continue on into a PhD program, we actually there's an opportunity for people to be able to transition into a PhD program. And so that's what I did. I still wrote up the project that I was working on that would have been my master's thesis, and we published that and presented it and whatnot, but it just wasn't a formal master's degree, so to speak. So I don't actually have my master's, but like you said, I do have my PhD in nutrition science. And so the PhD experience is a marathon for sure. In many more ways than one. And so for anyone that has done long endurance training recognizes the time that goes into that, the thoughtful planning process around that. But everyone's PhD experience is very different. So I know individuals that are working full time and they're working online on getting their PhD, and a PhD in a science program is different than a PhD in a different program. So, or if you're doing research or if you're doing a teaching intensive experience. So I think bottom line, what the biggest takeaway is the ability to be able to understand science and quality research and what that research process looks like. And I do see that in a difference between colleagues that I work with that have a master's degree but don't have a PhD. That really does tend to be the bigger difference between the two.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing some light on that. That is interesting that you didn't have to get your master's. I didn't even know that was a possibility. So
in some programs, yeah, it's different for every school. But.
Sure. So let's kind of segue into, you've been teaching. How long have you been teaching then for?
That's a great question. So I'm in my fourth year here at Simpson College, but as far as when I started teaching, I had the opportunity to start teaching as a graduate student. And so I probably am in 7 or 8 years now when you add up co-teaching as a graduate student as well.
Okay. So you've been a farmer longer than you've been a teacher.
Yeah, actually, I've never thought about it that way, but that's true.
So talk to me about how, what does your husband's family do? How did you kind of feel about the whole start of being part of a farming community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my husband's family raises cattle and hogs, and then they also have crops as well. So primarily corn and soybeans. And so they have what's called a cow-calf operation, which means that they calve their own cattle crop, so to speak. Some farming operations will feed out the cattle, and so we don't do that typically. We have the baby calves, which is a really fun time of year. We're getting into that time of year right now, where the little baby calves are around and they're cute and they run around in the backyard, and that's really fun to be able to do. Can be exhausting at times, but it's fun. And so anyway, that's the operation that we have, so to speak. And then they move on to a different type of facility after they get to a certain size or a certain weight.
Okay. And so when you think about when did you start making the connection then between, like, as a dietitian, like how important it was for you to know more about farming and to be, as an outsider, as a dietitian? I know as a family member and being very in it to win it with your family, but as a dietitian, when did you kind of start seeing the crossover of the importance of knowing more about farming?
I really credit the program at Iowa State for that. They do a phenomenal job, the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition. And Dr. McDonald is just one of the many wonderful resources that's there at that program. But they do an incredible job of always being at the forefront of, here is the research. Let's take it back to science. Let's forget about what the media is saying, and let's really analyze the evidence here. And the faculty as a whole do a great job of supporting that. And so, they didn't know that I was part of a farming family necessarily when I was in the classroom. Their job was to teach you the science and to teach you the science of the nutrition specifically. And so you learned the pros and you learned the cons, and then you talked about the quality of the research. And at the end of the day, here's what we know about it. Not to say that it's not going to change tomorrow and that there's going to be a different research study. Sometimes I joke with my students now that, I envy my colleagues that might teach a course that doesn't change rapidly, where the content is the same every single year they go back to teach it, because that's not at all our experience when we're teaching even general nutrition. That sometimes you feel like by the time you've even taught it, there's a new study. Exactly. It's rapidly changing so quickly. But really during graduate school is when I started to really realize how important this conversation was, connecting nutrition and agriculture.
And I think I feel like, I don't know if you kind of see this now too, but as I'm an older dietitian, so I feel like I didn't have a lot of those conversations kind of when I think about school and earlier years of my career. And I feel like we're just kind of starting to get that to be more on the brains, the forefronts of dietitians, younger dietitians, of how important it is to know more about agriculture. Do you kind of feel that way too?
Absolutely. Yeah. The conversation is constantly evolving, and what it is now in terms of the conversations around agriculture is even different when it was when I was going in school as well too. But it's important nonetheless, for sure.
So when do you get questions yourself about, as being a dietitian and being a farmer, what kind of questions do you get from other professionals or your students or just from coworkers about the two crossing?
I would say the most common question, most people recognize me as a dietitian or an exercise fitness professional, exercise physiologist in my day-to-day job. We do have the opportunity. So my husband also works in agriculture. And so we are frequently with many farmers and their spouses, and so have the opportunity to have conversation around nutrition, because I was in graduate school for so long, or school in general for so long, and traveling with him and having these conversations that they always saw me studying off to the side or working on my computer. And so the running joke was always like, they knew what I was studying and what I was learning and whatnot. And so now, as we continue to see them, it's fun to be able to have these conversations. But they definitely, the most common questions are around, it used to be GMOs. That's maybe not as popular right now as what it used to be, because right now it's plant-based versus animal products that we're getting a lot of questions around. Dairy, milk, what milk should I be drinking? Should I not be drinking milk? Those are probably the few most, and just animal products in general, I would say, are definitely the hot topics.
Sure. And I would agree with you on the milk, like the milk situation, and then also the plant-based, and how that has completely transformed people's thought process on what they choose, because they think it's automatically healthier, which I think is interesting. But I think that's interesting that you had the farmers asking you questions from a dietitian standpoint than actually other professionals or coworkers that you work with asking you questions about being a farmer.
Well, at the end of the day, farmers, everyone is a human. Everyone wants to make informed decisions, and everyone wants to be as informed as possible in every element of the conversation. And so by having conversation is the only way that we can continue to strengthen our own beliefs, because the stronger we understand the other side of the table, the better we understand our own views as well. And so some are from a nutrition standpoint. Some of the conversations stem from how typically we see this group of farmers that I'm talking about, particularly, we see them about once a year, if not more. And so you're talking about what's happened in the last year. And so, in the event where, I'm recovering from a heart attack, for example, then they'll, bring up, oh, my dietitian has me on this diet, or now all of a sudden I can't eat this. And so that really brings up a conversation for me to talk about, ask them questions of what they are learning, what they're trying, what they're doing, what's making them feel better. And as you know, and many of the dietitians that you talk to, the dietitian are not the food police. We actually probably allow more food than what most people ever think that we do. And so that was one of the things that I realized when I was going through my cardiac rehab experience, that even when I was done working cardiac rehab, they kept calling me back to cardiac rehab because I brought a different conversation to the table for those patients. And so I talked a lot about the BOLD diet. And so BOLD diet, are you familiar with BOLD diet?
I am not. Please share.
So beef on a lean diet. And it is research that is done out of Penn State. And it's incredible research that shows that beef can be included in the daily meal plan and still provide optimal improvements in terms of cardiovascular metabolic health as a diet like Mediterranean or DASH diet. And DASH would be the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, which is kind of that gold standard in terms of a cardiovascular medical nutrition therapy approach. And so instead of coming in and saying you shouldn't eat red meat because you've had a heart attack, or you shouldn't eat X, Y, and Z for animal products, my conversation would be, let's talk about how we can continue to provide that as your favorite option. But we look at leaner cuts of meat and we look at portion size. And so those were the two things that we would often approach. Of course, we deal with seasonings and sodium and that sort of thing as well. But, I had the ability to be able to say, because I went through my internship and did a lot of those rotations after I had finished my PhD. And so that also provided a great experience for me to be able to draw on my research experience from graduate school and to bring that into my conversations when I was doing my clinical rotations. And so I really enjoyed being able to, to see the smile on that person's face on the other side of the table in the cardiac rehab room. And they're like, you mean that I can actually have my steak tomorrow on my birthday or on my anniversary? And absolutely. And it shouldn't be the only day that, you offer yourself that choice. So it should come, like everything, in moderation. We like to say that all food fits, and that is essentially true for all animal products.
I think that's amazing. And I think that's a good message for even other dietitians practicing. I think that's a part of educating yourself. And I love that you had that research angle, because a lot of us don't have that, or they don't kind of read the research to provide that kind of information and to give patients more control back to what they can and cannot eat, and that all foods do actually fit, even if you've had a major life health event.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, for sure.
And I think probably from for your perspective, as far as talking to other dietitians about what you think they should know as dietitians when it comes to agriculture, what would you speak to them about?
Oh, excellent question. I think this is true for not just dietitians, but for anyone, that the source of your information is so critical to the conversation. And so anytime that you have the ability to go directly to a primary source, and when we're talking agriculture, we're talking the farmer themselves. Go to a farm, visit a farm, ask questions of a farmer, see how it's done. It opens up your eyes to an entirely different perspective. And, being primarily around a beef industry or a beef operation, I didn't know as much about dairy. And so I recently had an opportunity to go visit a dairy farm. And it was amazing what I had no idea what robotic milking was. And so to be able to witness the cows freely enter a milking station at their choice of time of day of when they do that, and to be able to leave that when they want to leave that, was amazing to me, because that answered a lot of the questions that I get right there around, well, are animals confined? Are they not comfortable? Are they, led by a rope down to the milking station and forced to stand here? No, I actually witnessed how they were able to do that. And having breastfed my own children, I could actually empathize with oh gosh, girl, you got to stand in line. I am really sorry about that right now. It's painful. If you need to be able to do that, that is what their body is made to do.
Well, you've also had 3 children, right? You have triplets. So,
well, twins, but yeah, they're 20 months. So they were
twins. Yeah, together. You have Irish triplets, right?
There you go.
No, but we both got to attend that event. And I think that is something to be said for even, I've never experienced it either. And I love the fact that you've said to go and experience it firsthand, even if you're not 100% on board with whatever you have in your mind of what happens on a farm. That's the experience that you need to have to see it in real life.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's also where you have the opportunity to really analyze the questions around ethics, because that's a large part of the conversation for some individuals on whether or not they choose to eat animal products or not. And, something that they mentioned when we were at that visit at the dairy farm that I also witnessed in a beef operation is that protection of the calf after it's born. And so some people will ask, well, we shouldn't be separating the calf from the mother because it causes stress, and it just seems rude to be doing that, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Well, the alternative is the safety of that small animal, that new animal, is highly compromised and highly at risk when you don't remove that animal from that environment, because I've seen young calves get stepped on because they aren't strong enough to be able to stand themselves, particularly if you're outdoors. I mean, you talk about more common questions. I get a lot of questions around grass-fed, and should grass-fed beef or grass-fed animals be our only products, or free range, so to speak. That's great depending upon where you live, but that's not the reality if you want to eat local foods and you live in Iowa or you live in the Midwest. I don't know a single farmer that wouldn't prefer to have their animals out in a pasture, freely ranged setting 365 days of the year if they could. Believe me, as a spouse, as someone who, is not necessarily doing the chores now that we have children as much as what I was before. It would be much easier if the cattle were out grazing on their own every day instead of several hours of the day being consumed by chores. But that's just not an option. You know, there are some summers, and it's not just a summer or a winter thing. There's some summers where you have to start feeding alternative sources to the animals because of a drought situation. And so that grass is no longer growing in the middle of July. And so there's just so many different dynamics and elements that you don't have the ability to be able to conceptualize until you truly go and witness that. I actually recently just had a conversation with a colleague who is a veterinarian, but also she specializes in animal welfare. And we were having this conversation around the separation of the animal shortly after birth. And she actually also said that it causes the animal typically more stress when you try to wean that animal from the mom at an older age, because now that bond is formed. And so they're more likely to become ill when you stress them, just like we are when we're stressed. We're more likely to become sick. So is the animal. And then you have the safety, the physical safety of them being protected and not surrounded by animals that are 4 or 5 times their size. And so she also talked about, she particularly specializes in swine, and just, you know, the natural habitat, the natural nature of how a pig acts, their natural behavior, their natural tendencies are destructive. And so they have to be in certain parameters, certain living quarters for their own safety, because they will physically destroy certain elements of a setup or a hog setting or a barn setting, so to speak, if they're able to. And that's just the animal, that's the natural animal behavior of that animal.
And when you have so many of them together, that you really have to consider all those factors.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if it was just 1 or 2, then there is the social isolation of an animal by itself. And that's a different part of the ethics conversation too.
So many things, like so many things that people don't think about when they're sharing their opinions.
Absolutely. Like I said, there's so many moving pieces and parts. And another conversation that I recently had with a farmer, I actually posed the question to them. I said, so what do you feel is the most misunderstood part of your job? And they said, without a hesitation, how well the animals are treated. They said, I would love more people to come out and see how much time and physical energy and emotional energy is put into caring for my animals. And I think many farming families with livestock would joke that the animals, the 4-legged members of the family or 2-legged members of the family, depending upon people, you know, get more attention many times of the year than the rest of the family does. And that's because they love and they care and they have a passion in their family for that, for feeding the world.
We saw that on our trip with Midwest Dairy to Chicago. Those were like the happiest cows I've ever seen, I think, in my life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And it was downpouring rain, and, you know, rain or shine, you don't get a snow day in agriculture, right? Like we don't get that in healthcare either. People need tended to in the hospital setting, and animals need tended to as well. So, and weather, you know, if we're going to talk about weather, that brings up a, you know, similar to the conversation around pasture or free range animals. If you put animals out there, and this is something that's been fun for me to be able to witness, like, over the last 10 years, like now I finally have a good understanding to be able to take back to my students or to my clients or to my patients to be able to say, you know what, those animals don't want to be out in the middle of an open range pasture when it's 105 degrees and 90% humidity. Like they want protection. They want shade. You can find them in the middle of summer in the middle of the trees to be able to have that protection, or in the middle of winter in the building. If you know, they have the option to go between a building and out in the pen, they're going to be in the building out of the wind, just like we would if we were put in that situation as well. So
yeah, that kind of gets forgotten, like the 100-degree weather with 95% humidity and the -degree weather in the snow.
Absolutely.
Makes sense, though. I think it's great that you're sharing your perspective as, both that dietitian professional and then also that farming professional, that you are realistic, but you're also very mindful of what a dietetics professional is thinking about and questioning, as well as what the farmer is thinking about and questioning.
Yeah. And I think, opportunities like this to have conversation are how everyone continues to move forward. And one of the things that I tell my students all the time, and we've done this with patients too, is be your own case study. If you want to explore something, try a different product, see if it, over time, not just one product obviously is going to change your lab values, but start a change and then reassess. So we have so many different abilities to be able to look at fasting blood glucose or cholesterol levels or cortisol levels of stress in the body, levels of inflammation in the body. I've done my own experiments. I eat a lot of animal products for a variety of reasons, both meat and dairy. Don't ever try to take cheese or milk out of my diet, please. I don't think I'd be able, I was always praying when I was nursing my girls, please, I hope to goodness that I don't have to remove that. I don't know what I would do. But I continually analyze my labs and I make sure that I'm doing the rest of the piece of the puzzle as well. And it's not, yes, nutrition is a lot of the conversation, but we have to get up and move more as a society. And so anytime I tell my students, when you find a study or a news article that has a headline about this product now results in X disease, you find the original research article, and the first thing I want you to search for is physical activity and exercise. And if it says search result not found, throw it out. Because there are so many elements of physical activity and exercise that we can't look at studies that aren't factoring in the benefits of physical activity.
That's so interesting. I'm going to start doing that now too. I guess I've never really thought of that. That's so true, though.
And I have to say that with a grain of salt, because of course the bold diet isn't going to be looking at exercise, and it's a very well done study, so to speak. But when you're talking about relating it to disease, right? I mean, they were a very specific focus and looking at specific health outcomes and improvements and those metabolic factors. So
interesting. Well, I really appreciate you joining in a conversation about this. I think it's great having, you know me, I love conversation. So this is right up my alley.
Oh no, we could talk for days about this topic.
We could. And I'm going to include your email in the show notes. So if people would have any questions for you, I hope as dietitians, you reach out to Katie and ask her any question that you have about being a farmer and a dietitian, because she has some great insight.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Anne.
Yeah. Well, I have to end with my favorite questions that all of our listeners want to know. So why don't you share with me some of your favorite foods that you enjoy?
Oh, without a doubt, chocolate is at the top of the list. I will pick the chocolate dessert any day if you put it in front of me. But I would say the others on my list are breakfast foods. That is pancake, waffle, muffin, all of that stuff is favorite. And then Brussels sprouts, salmon, feta cheese, so many
strong flavors.
Yeah.
You like strong flavor stuff. Yeah. Nice. What about favorite beverages that you enjoy?
I am pretty boring when it comes to beverages. I will be honest. I am a water, milk, and coffee person, and that is about all I really consume.
What else do you need?
Basic. Yeah, I know, right? With some red wine thrown in there, good beer here and there, but yeah, I'm pretty basic. A lot more coffee now than there ever used to be before I had children in graduate school. I attribute some of that to graduate school as well.
Totally understand. Favorite scent or scents you enjoy?
Okay, this is funny because the local creamery just opened up here in Indianola. And when we walked in the other day for the, opened up for the season, I should say, I walked in and I'm like, oh, this smell is so wonderful. That local creamery smell.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the Cold Stone when you walk by the Cold Stone in the mall.
Oh, so good.
But pumpkin spice regularly is a favorite of mine as well.
Favorite of yours. What kind of things do you like to listen to? Are you a music person? Do you listen to the radio?
Radio? Both. I'm listening to, in terms of music, if I'm working and I'm trying to be productive with writing, it's more instrumental, because otherwise I will sing to everything I can find to sing to. It could be country, it can be crazy rap. Like I will attempt to sing it in my head, and then I will not be productive. So instrumental. I played piano growing up, and so I enjoy instrumental music. But if I'm trying to exercise, or actually, my oldest was born in the delivery room. They asked me if I wanted to turn on some calming music, and I was ready to push. And I said, no, I want you to turn on Pitbull and Akon. So if I need to get something done in terms of physical activity, it's completely opposite end of the spectrum. And the nurses just absolutely laughed hysterically. So,
oh my God, I love you, Katie. That's amazing.
With of course country in there too. I do love my country, but depends what I'm doing.
And what brings you joy in life?
Oh, now with children, this is funny because it absolutely makes me laugh and smile when my children are fighting over the broccoli and the avocado. Like, I wanted the last avocado. No, I wanted more broccoli. She ate all the broccoli. I will welcome those arguments in terms of parenting any day of the week.
That's amazing. That's amazing that's even happening. Wow. Well, you're doing your job, girl. For sure.
We're trying. I don't know. But yes, kids, family, traveling, all of that is definitely fulfills and keeps me going every day.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for our conversation today. I've enjoyed so much talking to you even more and getting to know you better. And I hope to stay connected with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
I have such a sincere appreciation for farmers and all they do to secure safe and plentiful food for our country. Katie gave such great insight, being in the position of both dietitian and farmer. Please reach out if you want to know more about farming or how to connect with farmers. You can find her email in the show notes. Remember to be great always, find the joy in each day, and to start a conversation that truly matters.